My name's Rebecca, I'm 19, and last year my stepdad made me an offer so shocking I thought I'd misheard him. I told my mom, expecting her to protect me, but instead she blamed me. What happened next changed everything I believed about family, loyalty, and truth. Tell me where you're watching from in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories about family secrets, emotional courage, and the power of speaking up. If you told me a year ago that my own stepdad would be the reason I'd packed my bags in the middle of the night, I would have laughed. Mark was supposed to be the good one. That's what everyone said. From our neighbors to the ladies at my mom's work. You're so lucky your mom found someone like him, they'd tell me. As if the universe had delivered us a miracle in the shape of a middle-aged man who fixed things around the house and remembered birthdays. That night started like any other, quiet, ordinary, and painfully normal. It was a Wednesday evening in our small Ohio home. I just finished my shift at the coffee shop and came home smelling like espresso and sugar. My mom was setting the table, humming along to an old country song on the radio. Mark was at the stove pretending to help, but really just sipping his beer and giving directions. "Dinner's ready," Mom said cheerfully as I walked in. I sat down, tired but content. For a few minutes we just talked about nothing, the weather, my shift, my college plans. Then out of nowhere Mark set his fork down and said, "So Rebecca, have you thought about how you're gonna pay for next semester?" It sounded casual, but the way his eyes fixed on me made it feel like a test. I shrugged. "I'm applying for another student loan. Maybe working more shifts at the shop." He leaned back in his chair, smiling slightly. "You know, I could help with that. Pay your tuition. No loans, no debt." Mom looked up, surprised but happy. "That's so generous of you, honey." But he didn't look at her when he said it. He looked at me, steady, unblinking, too long. "You just have to promise me something," he added, his voice lowering just a little. The room seemed to shrink. "Promise what?" I asked, trying to sound casual. He tilted his head. "That you'll be loyal to me. You know, that you'll take my side if your mom and I ever disagree. That you'll remember who's really looking out for you." I froze. My mom laughed softly, thinking it was some sort of joke, and went back to cutting her meatloaf. But Mark kept staring at me, waiting for an answer. I managed a small laugh. Yeah, sure." He smiled then, satisfied. "Good girl," he said, and went back to eating like nothing strange had happened. But something had happened. Something I couldn't name, but I could feel it, thick in the air like smoke. Later that night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, hearing their muffled voices through the thin walls. My mom was talking about weekend plans, but all I could hear was Mark's voice in my head. "Be loyal to me." It didn't sound like a father figure. It sounded like a deal. The next day he acted perfectly normal, too normal. He offered to drive me to class, which he'd never done before. He even bought my favorite iced coffee on the way, joking about how he takes care of his girls. Every smile, every word felt like it had a double meaning. When we pulled into the parking lot, he stopped the car before I could open the door. "You know I meant what I said last night," he said quietly. "I'll pay for everything. I just want to make sure you're loyal. That's all." I looked at him, trying to figure out if he was teasing. He wasn't. His expression was calm, too calm. "I'm your stepdaughter, Mark," I said, my voice trembling a little. He nodded slowly. "Exactly. Family sticks together. Just remember that." I got out of the car and walked toward campus, my legs shaking. For the rest of the day, I couldn't focus on anything. His tone, his eyes, his words, they all looped in my head like a bad song. That evening, when I told my friend Cassie about it, she frowned. "That's not normal, Becca. He's crossing boundaries. Big time." I tried to laugh it off, but her serious expression made me feel even worse. "He probably just meant like don't argue with him and stuff," I said. Cassie shook her head. "It doesn't sound that simple. You need to keep an eye on him." That weekend things got weirder. On Saturday morning, I was sitting at the kitchen table scrolling through my phone when Mark came in wearing his usual smug smile. "Morning, sunshine," he said, pouring himself coffee. "Morning," I muttered, keeping my eyes on my phone. He leaned against the counter, watching me for a second too long. "You know, your mom doesn't appreciate you like I do," he said suddenly. My head snapped up. "What's that supposed to mean?" He smiled faintly. "Nothing bad. Just saying I see your potential. You're smart, hardworking. You remind me of myself at your age. I forced a polite smile. Thanks. He nodded, then added, and I meant what I said about helping you out. You just have to make sure you've got my back when it counts. Not everyone in this house does. I didn't respond. I just stood up, grabbed my keys, and left before my mom came down. For the next few days I avoided him. I worked extra hours, stayed out late, and pretended to study longer than I needed to. But every time I came home, he'd find a reason to talk. One night he brought me a new notebook, said it was for my college notes. Another time he offered to fix my laptop even though it wasn't broken. Each gesture made my skin crawl. I couldn't tell if I was overreacting or if something darker was really happening. That Tuesday night, things came to a head. I came home around 8. Mom was upstairs showering, and Mark was sitting in the living room watching TV. He muted it as soon as I walked in. Hey, he said. We need to talk. I hesitated but sat down across from him. He leaned forward. I've been thinking. Maybe you don't trust me yet. That's fine. But you need to understand. I'm trying to help you. Your mom. She doesn't always make good decisions. I'm the one keeping this family together. My hands tightened in my lap. Mark, I don't want to talk about Mom. He smiled. I'm just saying when the time comes, you'll see who's really on your side. And I'll still pay for school, no matter what she says. You just have to promise you won't let her twist things. Something inside me snapped. That's not your decision to make, I said quietly. I don't want your money. He tilted his head, studying me. You'll change your mind. That's when my mom came downstairs, wrapped in a towel, and asked what we were talking about. Mark instantly switched tones. Just chatting about college plans, honey, he said smoothly. I offered to help with tuition. She smiled proudly. That's wonderful, Mark. See, Rabecca? He really cares about you. I looked at her, the woman who'd raised me alone for years, who worked double shifts so we could get by, and I didn't have the heart to argue. Yeah, I said quietly. He really does. But inside I was screaming. That night I barely slept. I kept replaying every moment, every word, every stare. I thought about my mom, how tired she looked lately, how much she depended on him. If I told her what was really happening, would she even believe me? The house was dark and silent except for the hum of the fridge. I got up, went to the kitchen, and poured a glass of water just to have something to do. That's when I saw Mark's phone on the counter, buzzing with a text. I shouldn't have looked, but curiosity won. It was a message from one of his buddies at work. You're lucky, man. Raising a pretty one like that. I felt sick. I didn't open the message or touch the phone, but the words burned into me. The next morning I couldn't look at him. Couldn't even say good morning. He noticed. Everything okay? He asked, fake concern in his voice. Just tired, I said, and went straight out the door. That was the night everything shifted. Not with screaming or confrontation, but in quiet understanding. I knew what kind of man he really was, and I knew I couldn't stay quiet much longer. I didn't know how bad things would get, not yet. But that night, as I sat in my car outside Cassie's place, trying to breathe through the panic, I made myself a promise. If he ever tried to twist the truth again, I'd find a way to expose him, even if it meant losing everything else. When I woke up the next morning, the air in the house felt different. He was already gone. His mug rinsed in the sink, his jacket missing from the hook. Mom was humming in the kitchen, making pancakes like it was any other Saturday morning. But I couldn't forget last night. His offer, his smirk, that uncomfortable silence that hung between us like a shadow. I watched her flip pancakes, her hair messy, her robe loosely tied. You're up early, she said, glancing at me with a tired smile. Couldn't sleep, I murmured, trying to sound casual. She poured syrup on a plate, sliding it across the table. You've been so on edge lately, Becky. What's going on with you? I hesitated. I wanted to tell her. I wanted to scream what he said to me. But every time I opened my mouth, I imagined that same disbelief in her eyes. The same look she gave me years ago when I tried to tell her about the strange way he sometimes looked at me, like he was measuring what he could get away with. So I swallowed it down again. Just college stuff, I lied. She sighed, sitting down with her coffee. You'll get through it. You always do. Her faith in me used to mean everything. But now it just made me ache, because the one thing she didn't see was what was happening right under her nose. That week, small things began to shift. He started leaving the TV on when I came home, pretending to watch the news while asking casual questions about my classes. His tone was smooth, practiced. "So, you think you'll get into state? That tuition's no joke." I'd nod, barely answering, wishing he'd stop talking to me altogether. "Your mom's worried about the money," he'd say, eyes flicking toward me. "I could help, you know. If you help me." The same words. The same quiet threat dressed up as generosity. I remember gripping the edge of the couch so tightly my knuckles went white. I didn't respond. I just grabbed my backpack and left the room. When Mom got home that night, he greeted her with that practiced warmth, pouring her a glass of wine, making her laugh. I stood in the hallway watching their easy rhythm, wondering how someone could be so good at pretending. He kissed her on the forehead and whispered something in her ear. She smiled, completely oblivious. I felt sick. By the middle of the month, his act began to crack. He'd leave doors open when I came out of my room. He'd comment on what I was wearing. Sometimes he'd accidentally brush past me in the kitchen. Each time I'd freeze, my body tense, my breath caught in my throat. I tried to tell Mom one night when she was doing laundry. "He's making me uncomfortable," I said quietly. She barely looked up. "Uncomfortable how?" "He says weird things. He looks at me differently." Her face changed. She set the basket down slowly, frowning. "Rebecca, don't start this again. You're just stressed. He's been trying so hard lately. He's the one helping pay your car insurance, remember?" I stared at her. "So that means he gets to talk to me like that?" Her eyes hardened. "Like what?" "He's your stepfather. Show some respect." That word respect felt like a slap. I walked out before I said something I'd regret, but inside something cracked. I realized I was completely alone in this house. One afternoon when I came home from class early, I heard him in the living room talking on the phone. His voice was low, controlled. "She doesn't suspect anything," he said. My stomach dropped. I stayed quiet, hidden behind the wall. "I'll handle it. She won't tell her mom, she's too scared," he continued. Then a pause. A chuckle. "No, she's not that type. She'll keep quiet if she knows what's good for her." I felt my pulse hammering in my ears. He hung up a few seconds later. I tiptoed to my room and locked the door, my hands shaking. That was the moment I knew. He wasn't just playing games. He was planning something. That night, Mom noticed I'd been crying. "What's wrong?" she asked, sitting beside me on my bed. "Mom, I think you need to listen to me," I said, voice trembling. "He's not who you think he is." She sighed, already defensive. "Rebecca, please don't do this again." "I heard him on the phone," I pressed. "He said I wouldn't tell you. He's planning something." "Enough." Her voice cut through the air. "You're twisting everything. He's been nothing but kind to you. Do you realize how much pressure he's under, trying to support this family?" I stared at her in disbelief. "So now it's my fault again?" Her eyes filled with tears. "You've always had trouble forgiving people, Becky. Ever since your dad left." I couldn't listen anymore. I stormed out, slamming the door behind me. That night I sat in my car outside the local diner trying to calm down. The neon lights buzzed, the air smelled like coffee and fries, and for a moment, I wished I could just disappear into that normal, ordinary world. But I couldn't. I had to do something. The next few days were a blur of silence. He acted like nothing had happened. Mom barely spoke to me. The house felt cold, divided like two separate worlds under one roof. I avoided him, staying late at the library or in the campus cafe just to kill time before going home. But avoidance only worked for so long. One evening, I came home to find him sitting at the dining table, papers spread out in front of him. "Hey," he said, smiling faintly. "Got a minute?" My pulse spiked. "I have homework," I muttered. He leaned back in the chair. "You don't need to be scared of me, you know." I froze at the doorway. "I'm not scared," I lied. He laughed quietly. "Sure you're not." Then he said something that made my blood run cold. "I talked to your mom. She thinks you're acting out. She trusts me to help you. Straighten up." "Stay away from me," I said firmly. He tilted his head, eyes narrowing. "That's not a very nice thing to say to the man paying for your future." My hands were trembling. I don't want your money. He smiled again, cold, deliberate. You'll change your mind. And then he stood up and walked away, humming softly like it was just another evening. That night I packed a small bag. Just my laptop, wallet, and a few clothes. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay. When I came downstairs, Mom was waiting by the door. Where do you think you're going? I froze. I need to clear my head. Not with that tone, you don't, she said sharply. Your stepfather told me what's going on. You've been rude, dismissive, and ungrateful. I stared at her, heart pounding. He told you what he did? He told me you've been making up stories again, she said softly. And I believe him, Rebecca. I have to. Her voice cracked on the last words, and for the first time, I saw something like guilt flash in her eyes. But it was fleeting. I couldn't fight her anymore. I walked past her, opened the door, and stepped into the cold night. The air hit me like freedom and grief mixed together. I didn't know what would happen next, but deep down, I knew this was just the beginning. The truth was starting to show through the cracks, and soon everyone would see it. And when they did, no one would be able to deny it anymore. You said. The night I left home was cold. Sharp wind cutting across my face as I sat in my car, parked at the edge of the gas station lot. I remember staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror, trying to recognize the girl looking back at me. Her eyes were swollen, her hair messy, her face pale from holding back tears. I didn't have a plan. Just a small overnight bag and a tank that was half empty. I called my friend Jenny, praying she'd answer. Bex? It's midnight, are you okay? She said, her voice thick with sleep. I needed to get out, I whispered. Can I crash at your place for a night? Of course. Come over. You don't even have to explain right now. Her kindness nearly broke me. When I pulled into her driveway, the porch light flickered on. She came out in her hoodie and slippers, waving me in. The moment I stepped inside, the smell of lavender candles and clean laundry wrapped around me like safety. But even there, my mind wouldn't stop spinning. What if Mom called the cops? What if he told her I was lying again? I couldn't shake the fear that somehow this would all turn against me. The next morning, Jenny made coffee and slid a mug toward me. You look like you haven't slept in days. I haven't, I admitted. She sat across from me. So, are you going to tell me what happened? I hesitated, then told her everything, the offer. His manipulation, the way Mom refused to believe me. I watched her face twist from disbelief to anger. Rebecca, that's disgusting, she said finally. You need to tell someone. Like the police or a counselor or anyone. I can't, I whispered. He's too smart. He'll twist it. Mom already thinks I'm lying. If I go to the police and she denies it, I'll look crazy. Jenny reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Then at least tell your aunt or your guidance counselor. Someone who'll listen. I wanted to believe that was possible. But deep down I already knew. He'd been building this image of himself for years. The charming stepdad. The helpful neighbor. The guy who fixed people's gutters for free. Nobody would believe me over him. Still, I decided to try. The next day I called my Aunt Carol. She'd always been the one in the family who saw through people's nonsense. I told her I needed to talk. When I drove to her house, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the steering wheel. She welcomed me with open arms. Sweetheart, what's going on? You sound scared. I sat on her couch and told her everything, from his words that night to Mom's disbelief. She listened quietly, her brow furrowed. When I finished, she said softly, You did the right thing by leaving. Relief flooded through me. Finally, someone believed me. But that relief didn't last long. Because the very next day, my phone buzzed with a message from Mom. We need to talk. Come home right now. My stomach twisted. I almost ignored it, but something in me needed closure, or at least a chance to be heard. So I went. When I pulled into the driveway, his truck was already there. The front curtains were drawn, the porch light off. My heart pounded as I stepped inside. Mom was sitting on the couch, her arms folded. He was standing beside her, calm as ever. I don't want to fight, I started, voice trembling. Mom didn't look at me. Your stepfather told me what's really going on, she said coldly. You've been spreading lies. To your friends. To your aunt. What? My voice cracked. Lies? Mom, I told the truth. He stepped forward, hands in his pockets. Rebecca, I get that you're upset. You didn't get into your first choice school. You're stressed. I understand. But saying things like this, it's not okay. I stared at him in disbelief. You're unbelievable. He sighed, glancing at Mom. You see? This attitude. It's been going on for months. She's angry, jealous. She can't stand that we're happy. Jealous? I snapped. You made a disgusting offer to me, and now you're saying I'm jealous? Mom finally looked up, tears brimming in her eyes, but they weren't for me. Stop it, she said sharply. Just stop. I can't listen to this anymore. I took a shaky breath. Mom, you have to believe me. I've heard enough, she said, standing up. He showed me the messages. My blood ran cold. What messages? He pulled out his phone. The ones where you begged me for money. I didn't want to show her, but you left me no choice. He turned the screen toward her and I saw them, fake messages. Fabricated texts using my name and photo, saying things I'd never written. Things that made it look like I had been manipulating him. My knees went weak. That's not me. You faked those. Mom's lip quivered. Rebecca, please. Just tell the truth. I am telling the truth. But she wouldn't meet my eyes anymore. He wrapped an arm around her shoulders, guiding her gently back to the couch. It's okay, honey. She's just confused. I couldn't breathe. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. He'd flipped everything, turned the truth against me so perfectly that it sounded believable. I ran out of the house and sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel, sobbing until I couldn't breathe. The world outside blurred through tears. That was the lowest moment of my life. Not because of what he did, but because my own mother chose him over me. I stayed in the car for hours before driving back to Aunt Carol's. She opened the door, took one look at me, and pulled me into a hug. Sweetheart, she whispered. What happened? He made fake messages. Mom believes him. She exhaled slowly, anger flashing in her eyes. All right. Then we'll handle this differently. That night, she made me tea and helped me call the local women's support hotline. The counselor listened, took notes, and gently explained how these situations often went. Manipulators didn't just lie. They made their victims look like the liars. It was like a light switched on. Everything made sense. He'd been planning this long before I realized it. But knowing that didn't make it hurt less. A few days later, my mom showed up at my aunt's house. I hadn't expected her. She looked exhausted. Eyes red, shoulders slumped. Can we talk? She asked quietly. Aunt Carol crossed her arms. Only if you're ready to listen this time. Mom nodded and followed me into the living room. For a long moment she just stood there, staring at her hands. You've always been a good girl, Becky, she said softly. That's why this hurts so much. I don't know who to believe. Tears stung my eyes. You really think I'd make this up? I don't know, she whispered. He showed me proof. He said you were trying to ruin him. I shook my head. He's lying. Please, Mom. You know me. You raised me. You know I wouldn't do that. She didn't answer. The silence between us was louder than any shouting could have been. Then she said something that shattered me completely. Until I see proof otherwise, I can't take sides. That was it. I stood up, shaking. You already did. She looked away, tears spilling down her cheeks. I just want peace in this family. There is no peace, I said quietly. Not while you're with him. I left the room before she could say anything else. That night, lying on the guest bed, I stared at the ceiling and realized something. Sometimes the truth doesn't set you free. Sometimes it buries you deeper because no one wants to hear it. But that didn't mean I'd stop fighting. Because I knew one thing for certain. He'd gone too far this time. He'd faked evidence, turned my own mother against me, and painted me as the villain. But the thing about lies is, they always leave cracks. And I was going to find every single one of them, even if it meant losing everything else along the way. For days after Mom's visit, I barely spoke to anyone. Aunt Carol tried to cheer me up, but I was drowning in silence, suffocated by how easily my truth had been twisted into a lie. It's strange how quiet pain can be. It just sits there, heavy, filling every corner of your chest until breathing itself feels exhausting. But something inside me refused to stay broken. Maybe it was anger. Maybe it was the faint hope that somewhere, somehow, the truth could still find its way out. Either way, I knew I couldn't move on without proof, something undeniable that even he couldn't twist. The problem was I didn't know where to start. Aunt Carol sat across from me at breakfast one morning, flipping through the mail. "You look like you're somewhere else, sweetheart," she said gently. "I am," I admitted. "I keep thinking about the fake messages. How he made them. There has to be a way to prove they're not real." She put down her coffee cup. "Then let's find it." Her words sparked something in me. A fire I thought I'd lost. That afternoon I called Jenny. She worked part-time at an electronics repair shop, the kind of place that saw all kinds of shady stuff with phones and computers. When I told her about the fake texts, she said, "If he used screenshots, I might be able to tell if they were edited. Bring me whatever you can." The problem was I didn't have his phone or access to the fake screenshots. But I remembered something. The night I stormed out, he'd left his office door slightly open. He always kept his files on a shared family laptop. If he'd been so confident to show Mom those messages, there had to be a trace. So with Aunt Carol's help, we came up with a plan. We waited until Saturday when we knew Mom and he would be out grocery shopping, same time every week, same store. My hands were shaking as I unlocked the door with the spare key I still had. The house smelled the same. Fresh linen, candles, and coffee. But it felt hollow now. I walked straight to his office. The laptop was on the desk, neat as ever. I turned it on, my pulse thudding. There it was, his email open on the screen. I started digging through the folders, trying to stay calm. My fingers trembled over the mouse. Come on. Come on. Then I saw it. A folder labeled Tax Docs 2023. My gut told me it wasn't what it looked like. Inside were screenshots, dozens of them, of the fake messages he'd created. Some were labeled with my name, others with timestamps. Clicked on one. It was my name in the chat, my profile picture, but the words weren't mine. He'd typed things like, "I really need the money and I promise I won't tell Mom." But at the bottom of each file was something he must have overlooked. The editing software watermark faintly visible in the corner. My breath caught. "Got you," I whispered. Then I did what Aunt Carol told me to do. I didn't touch or delete anything. I just took photos of every single file with my phone. As I scrolled, I found something worse. Draft emails. Messages to a friend of his. In one he wrote, "She's getting suspicious. I had to make it look like she's unstable before it blows up. Once this college thing passes, she'll be out of the house for good." The screen blurred through my tears. My hand shook so hard I almost dropped the phone. He hadn't just lied to protect himself. He'd planned to destroy me. I left the house before they got back, my heart pounding so fast I could barely think. I drove straight to Jenny's shop. She looked at the photos, zooming in, analyzing every pixel. "These are fakes, no question," she said. "See that faint blur? That's from editing." He used an app, probably one of those text generator tools. Anyone who knows tech could prove this in seconds. I felt tears prick my eyes. "You can prove it?" She nodded. "Yeah, but if you want it to hold up, you'll need someone official, maybe law enforcement or a lawyer. These screenshots? They could change everything." Her confidence steadied me. For the first time in weeks, I felt hope creeping in. That evening, I told Aunt Carol everything. She listened quietly, her face unreadable. When I finished, she said, "We're taking this to the police." I hesitated. "You really think they'll believe me?" "They'll believe evidence," she said firmly. "You have it now." The next morning, we went to the local precinct. I was terrified, my palms sweating, my voice trembling as I explained everything to the officer at the front desk. He listened, brows furrowed, then led us to a detective. Detective Harris was a middle-aged man with kind eyes and a tired expression. He asked to see the photos. When I showed him, he leaned closer. "Yeah," he said after a moment. "These have been tampered with." "Good catch." Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. He sighed. "Thing is, unless we can prove who made them or that they were used to harm your reputation, it's a civil issue, not criminal. You'd need a lawyer for defamation or harassment." My stomach dropped. "So, nothing happens to him?" "Not yet," the detective said gently. "But hold on to everything. Don't delete it. Sometimes the truth needs time to find the right audience." That night I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, going over every word, every look, every time he'd smirked when I cried. He thought he'd won. But he didn't know I had proof. The next morning, Aunt Carol handed me her phone. "Call your mother," she said. "You're not going to beg her to believe you. You're going to show her." My fingers trembled as I dialed. Mom answered after 3 rings. "Rebecca," she said cautiously. "What do you want?" "I want to see you. Just for 10 minutes. Please. Bring him if you have to." There was a long pause. Then she said quietly, "Fine. Tomorrow. The cafe near the park." I barely slept that night. My thoughts raced with a mix of fear and adrenaline. Tomorrow everything could change or collapse entirely. The cafe smelled of coffee and cinnamon when I walked in. Mom was already there, sitting at a corner table. He was beside her, his arm draped casually along the back of her chair. He looked smug, calm, untouchable. "Rebecca," Mom said, her voice tired. "You said you had something to show us." I sat down across from them and placed my phone on the table. "I do. But I need you to promise to look before you say anything." He smirked. "Still playing detective, huh?" I ignored him. I opened my gallery and scrolled to the photos. "These are the messages you showed her," I said, my voice steady. "Except they're not real. They were made on a text generator app." Mom frowned. "How do you know that?" I zoomed in on the watermark. "See that blur? That's the editing tool. And here, these are his draft emails. He literally wrote about making me look unstable." Her face went pale. "What?" He laughed. A sharp, nervous sound. "That's ridiculous. She probably made these herself." I turned to her. "Mom, I found them on your laptop. The one he uses every night." I didn't change anything. I just took photos. Jenny looked at them. The police saw them too. That last part made him flinch. Mom's hand covered her mouth. Her eyes darted between us, tears forming. "Is this true?" she whispered to him. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. "Tell her," I said softly. "Tell her you made it all up." His jaw tightened. "You're just trying to ruin my life." "No," I said. "You did that yourself." Mom's tears spilled over. She pushed her chair back, shaking her head. "I can't believe this, all this time." He reached for her hand, but she pulled away. "Don't touch me," she snapped. "You lied to me. You lied about her." The whole cafe went quiet. People were watching now, but I didn't care. Mom stood up, voice trembling. "Get out. Don't come home. Not tonight. Not ever." For once, he didn't have anything clever to say. He just grabbed his jacket and stormed out. I sat there, shaking, my heart pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. Mom sank back into her chair, covering her face. "Oh my God. I'm so sorry," she whispered through sobs. Tears welled in my own eyes. "I tried to tell you." "I know," she said, her voice breaking. "I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to think I'd chosen someone who could hurt my daughter like this." We sat there for a long time, both of us crying quietly. For the first time in what felt like forever, I saw something in her eyes that I hadn't seen in months. Belief. And that changed everything. Later that evening, she came to Aunt Carol's house. She hugged me like she hadn't seen me in years. "I've already called a lawyer," she said softly. "He's out of the house. Permanently." I didn't know what to say. Relief, sadness, anger. They all tangled together until I couldn't tell them apart. But one thought echoed in my mind, clear and steady. Sometimes the truth doesn't need to shout. It just needs proof strong enough to silence every lie. And now I finally had it. That night, after Mom came to Aunt Carol's house and hugged me like she was afraid I might vanish again, something shifted in the air. The silence that used to press between us like a wall began to dissolve. For the first time in months, she didn't look at me with doubt or hesitation. Her eyes, swollen and tired, carried only remorse. We sat together on the couch, the soft hum of the ceiling fan the only sound filling the room. Aunt Carol quietly brought us tea and left, sensing this was a moment only the two of us could share. Mom's hands trembled as she held her cup. "I don't even know where to start," she whispered. "Maybe at the truth," I said softly. She nodded slowly. "I thought I knew him, Rebecca. I really did. He was charming, patient, kind. And then one day all that kindness turned into control and I didn't even notice. He made me believe I was seeing things wrong. Her voice broke. And when he told me those things about you, I wanted so badly for them not to be true, but he sounded so certain. He made me feel like if I didn't believe him, I was betraying him. I swallowed hard. He made you choose between us. Yes, she said, tears spilling again. And I chose wrong. I didn't say anything. The words she'd just spoken were heavy enough to fill the room. For a long time we sat there in silence, just letting the truth breathe between us. Finally she reached for my hand. You must hate me. I shook my head. No. I just stopped knowing how to reach you. Her lips trembled. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make it up to you, Rabecca. Something in me eased then. Not forgiveness yet, but the beginning of it. The following days were quiet but strange. Mom moved in with Aunt Carol temporarily, while the lawyer handled the restraining order and property matters. The man who had spent months poisoning our lives was gone, but his presence lingered in the smallest corners. His books on the shelf, his cologne on a jacket she hadn't thrown away yet, the faint dent on the couch where he used to sit. I found Mom one afternoon standing in front of those books. She ran her fingers across their spines like she was searching for pieces of herself hidden between the pages. Do you want me to help you pack them away? I asked. She nodded without turning. Yes. I think I've had enough ghosts for one lifetime. We spent the afternoon boxing them up, the air thick with quiet determination. Every thud of a book hitting the box sounded like a piece of the past being sealed shut. When we were done, she looked around the empty space and said, You know what's funny? I thought this house made me feel safe. Turns out it just made me silent. I looked at her and realized that for the first time, she wasn't just my mother. She was a woman finding her own truth again. A week later, I received a call from Detective Harris. Rabecca, he said, we reviewed the digital trail from your photos. There's no doubt now, those files were created from your stepfather's account. You did good. If your lawyer wants an official report, we can issue one. When I told Mom, she closed her eyes, relief washing over her features. So it's official. Everyone will know he lied. Everyone who matters already does, I said. But she shook her head. No, honey. People whispered. They looked at you differently. They should hear the truth, not rumors. I didn't know if I had the strength to face everyone again. But something inside me said she was right. Sometimes the truth only heals when it's spoken out loud. Aunt Carol suggested hosting a small family dinner that weekend. A chance to clear the air, to reclaim what he had fractured. I wasn't sure I wanted to, but Mom said, we can't rebuild what we don't face. So we did. That Saturday, the living room filled with faces that hadn't all been in the same space since before the lies began. My cousins, uncles, my grandmother with her steady, knowing eyes. There was hesitation in their smiles, uncertainty in their greetings. When everyone had settled, Mom stood up. Her voice shook slightly, but she didn't falter. I need to tell you all something, she began. For months, I believed lies about my daughter. Lies that cost us both more than I can ever explain. I was shown messages that were fabricated, manipulated by someone I trusted. But now the truth has come out. The room was silent. She looked at me then, eyes glistening. My daughter never did any of those things. She was framed, and I failed her when she needed me most. My chest ached at her words, but I stood up beside her. It's okay, I said quietly. The truth finally spoke. You could hear a pin drop. Then my grandmother rose slowly, came over to me, and wrapped her arms around me. I always knew something wasn't right, she whispered. I'm proud of you, my dear. That broke the tension. My cousins came over, offering awkward but genuine hugs. Even the ones who had avoided me for months looked remorseful. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't instant healing. But it was a start. Later that night, after everyone left, Mom and I stood outside under the soft glow of the porch light. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of rain. You were so strong, she said. I don't think I could have done what you did. I smiled faintly. You would have. You just forgot how strong you were for a while. She looked at me with a mixture of pride and guilt. You sound more grown up than I remember. I had to be, I said quietly. A tear slipped down her cheek. I wish I'd been there while you were learning how. For a long time we stood there without saying another word. The truth had spoken, but healing was a quieter process. It came not through grand apologies, but through small, steady moments like this one. The next few weeks brought a rhythm back to our lives. Mom started working again at the community library, something she hadn't done since her marriage. I returned to my classes, though I found it hard to focus at first. But slowly life started feeling real again. One afternoon while I was studying, I got a message from Jenny. "He's trying to contact you through a new number. Don't reply. Block it." I froze. My pulse quickened, but I didn't panic this time. Instead, I calmly took a screenshot, blocked the number, and sent it to the lawyer. When I told Mom, she looked worried for a second but then smiled softly. "You handled that better than I ever could." "I'm done letting him take my peace," I said. And I meant it. Weeks later, on a quiet Sunday morning, we visited the park near the cafe where the truth had first unraveled. The benches were wet from dew, and the early sunlight turned everything gold. Mom sat beside me holding a takeaway cup. "You know, I used to bring you here when you were little. You'd always run to that swing," she said, pointing toward the far corner. I smiled. "I remember falling off once and crying until you carried me home." She chuckled softly. "You scraped your knee, and I told you pain doesn't mean weakness, it means you tried." She paused. "I forgot my own advice, didn't I?" "Maybe," I said gently. "But you remembered it now." She nodded, tears glimmering in her eyes. "I'm proud of you, Rabecca. Not just for proving the truth, but for surviving it." Her words wrapped around me like warmth after a storm. As the days turned into weeks, I realized something important. The truth doesn't always roar when it arrives. Sometimes it whispers softly, steadily, until the lies finally crumble under their own weight. People in our community began to hear about what really happened. A few came up to me at the grocery store or college, offering awkward apologies. Others avoided eye contact altogether, embarrassed by how easily they believed the worst. And that was fine. I didn't need their validation. The truth had already spoken where it mattered most. One evening I found Mom sitting by the window, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. I joined her quietly. "I got an email from him today," she said after a while. "He wanted to apologize." My chest tightened. "What did you do?" She smiled faintly. "Deleted it. Some truths don't need to be answered." I exhaled slowly. "Good." We watched the sky darken in silence, and for once it felt peaceful. Months later, I stood outside our old house again. The one that used to echo with tension and lies. It was empty now, for sale. The for sale sign swayed in the breeze like a quiet farewell. Mom stood beside me. "Do you want to go in one last time?" she asked. I thought about it for a moment, then shook my head. "No. That house already said everything it needed to." She smiled sadly. "Then let's go." As we walked away, I didn't look back. Because when the truth finally speaks, you don't owe the past a single glance, you owe it silence. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about how strange truth can be. It doesn't always arrive like thunder. Sometimes it takes its time, inching closer with every act of courage, every refusal to stay silent. I realized I wasn't the same person who once cried behind closed doors, desperate for someone to believe her. I was someone who had learned that truth doesn't need validation. It just needs light. And now it had it. For the first time in a long time, I slept without fear, without replaying the past. Because finally, the truth had spoken. And it never whispered again.